The following is a GoPowercat.com production.
All right, welcome to the Big 12 Insiders. Today we got Utah coming in. They're brand new to the conference. We're going to talk to them about hoops, football, and what they feel about coming into the Big 12 conference, leaving the Pac-12. This is the Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
All right, welcome to the Big 12 Insiders. This is Brien Hanley, otherwise Big B. Today we've got our man Steve Bartle, who covers Utah out there in Utah, Salt Lake City. Hey, Steve, how's it going, my man?
I'm good, Brian. How are you doing, brother?
I am doing all right. I appreciate you making the time for us today and coming in. So let's just kick this thing off, man. So talk to us for people that don't know about Utah, because obviously this is a Big 12 show, and they're not technically in the conference yet, but we're counting them as in the conference. You know, we're grouping Utah in as of right now. So tell us a little bit about Utah athletics for the people out there that are watching that don't know, that want to know a little bit more about Utah.
Yeah, I think when you talk, Utah athletics, Utah sports, the most prominent figure in all of that is Kyle Whittingham, right? Like he's been here for decades now, and he's meant a lot to the success, the overall success of the program, of the football program, and of really the athletic department. He's been a big part of just helping raise the bar here at Utah, over the last however many years he's been here. I lose track because it's been so many, but he's been here for a really long time. He was the defensive coordinator under Urban Meyer, took over when Urban left for Florida, and just continued to raise the bar for Utah, as he got his head coaching career going. And so, it starts there with Kyle, and just he's built this program over the course of time into, conference champion contending team where they won back-to-back Pac-12 championships in 2021 and 2022, which was kind of the culmination of years of work. They had been to the conference championship, in 2019 and 2018, but came up short to Washington and Oregon. And so to finally break through, in 2021, that leads you to the next prominent figure in Utah football, and that's Cam Rising, who is, he's been instrumental in Utah taking that next step as a program. And so he was that sort of missing piece. Utah had it all together: defense, the run game, special teams, and then Cam was kind of that final piece for Utah to break through and bring those trophies home. So, in terms of football, Kyle's the man. He's the man. Cam is right there, and then they've just built this roster up into a self-sustaining success. Absolutely. And it's they haven't lost sight of who they are and where they find success, and that's player development. That's finding guys that fit their culture first and foremost, and then just developing them over time. And they haven't lost track of that. And it continues to breed success, which, you're seeing at other programs, and you see a lot of in the Big 12, with Kansas State specifically. I see a lot of similarities there. Iowa State with Matt Campbell. So you just see it, all throughout the Big 12, but that's where Utah really hangs their hat, is player development.
Gotcha. And that's kind of where I look at Utah being a really good fit into the Big 12 for just what you said, player development. There's a lot of schools in the Big 12 that obviously some use the transfer portal. I would say all use the transfer portal a little bit. But as far as everything else, they are going to be schools, because you're not going to see any of the Big 12 schools that are going to be top 5, top 10 in recruiting. It's mainly going to be player development. So that's why I think that Utah is a really good fit for this conference as a whole, and just kind of blend into what they're doing on a football basis there. Now, flipping over to the basketball side, I know, the last couple of weeks hasn't been the best, losing 5 out of 7, but I still believe, Steve, that they are on the bubble. I still do. The season's not over. It's not over. And they have some really good wins. That's the thing. Early in the season, they got good wins. So that has to matter. I know a lot of people they try to cut up the season and then try to say that the last 5-6 games are the most important. But come on now. I mean, the beginning of the season has to matter. Otherwise, why do we play it? So I still think they're on the bubble. And if they get, I mean, a big win at UCLA on Sunday, I mean, I know UCLA is not great. I'm not saying that, but to go there and win, to try to right the ship a little bit, I mean, you got to do that, and they were able to do it. I just think down the stretch, they get at least 3 or 4 wins. I think they can get themselves off that bubble, Steve.
Yeah, no, that UCLA game was a big one for Utah. UCLA was, I think they had won 7 of their last 8. Like they had turned things around.
Correct.
Which came really because Utah beat them 90-44.
I was going to say destroyed them.
Yeah, so that was really kind of the turning point for UCLA and Mick Croat and getting that group to play better. So they had been playing better ball, and for Utah, obviously not playing their best ball over the same
right.
And to get that win, hopefully, sort of stops the bleeding that they've been going through over the last few weeks to maintain, to keep their tournament chances alive and tournament hopes alive. So, they have a great opportunity this weekend going on the road to Colorado. You have to hope that, after breaking through with their first road conference victory in over a year, that they can now turn it into 2 straight to back-to-back road wins. That's the hope. That's the goal for Utah. But overall, to your point, Brien, the success of this team, you can't take away what happened in November, right?
No, you can't.
They beat a good Wake Forest team that is they're also fighting for their tournament chances.
Yep.
St. Mary's going into their house. St. Mary's is a competitive program. They're in the tournament mix year in and year out, right? So getting that win, being competitive against the Houston program, which is top 2, top 3, top 5, throughout the season. Those are good signs, good indications of where this program is at. Fortunately, it's just whenever the calendar turns to the month of February, it just seems Utah just can't maintain the a high level of play. And there's a number of things that contribute to that. There's been injuries. A key piece to their puzzle is Rollie Rooster, who's been injured. But you have to hope that Utah, getting that win against UCLA, that they can turn this into a few more wins over the next 5 games to just kind of keep their tournament chances alive and secure a spot in the tournament in March.
Yeah. I just, like I said, you can't discount the stuff that they did, in the non-conference. And look, everybody, you could say, okay, it's February and they're not playing well. I go, but it's conference basketball. It gets tough for everybody in February. Yeah. You're going to go through lulls. They didn't go through a lull, early in the season, or like a lot of teams do. Sometimes you go through a lull. That didn't really happen. It happened in February, but they have an opportunity to kind of, like we said, to right the ship. I think, getting that win at UCLA is really going to go a long way in turning that around. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Brien, I just wanted to add, talking about the move to the Big 12, I think when you talk about basketball, there's a lot of excitement, and I don't want to, I don't want to say fear, but people understand that the Big 12 conference has run things over the last little while in college basketball. And so there's an understanding that, there's going to have to be another level or two that they have to climb to be competitive in this Big 12 conference. But there's a lot of excitement for Utah basketball and what it means for them in this move to the Big 12, specifically in the in recruiting, where, I've talked to a handful of guys. Jackson Johnson, who was their big commit this cycle, he specified the Big 12 was a big reason why he likes Utah and why he committed to Utah. Obviously, he grew up and just down the road, but playing in the Big 12 is a big thing for him. And so having that now, I think there's a lot of excitement about Utah moving to the Big 12, having the opportunity to take on a lot of these storied programs in college basketball.
That is good to hear, number one, Steve, because it kind of brings me to my next question, because, there'd been some rumblings and things back and forth. I mean, you hear on chat boards and on Twitter, or X, everything else about Utah fans not necessarily wanting to come to the Big 12, or kind of settling, okay, yeah, I guess we have to come here, blah, blah, blah. So kind of take us through that, because I kind of believe and not that I don't believe you. I think you're telling the truth about the basketball fans absolutely want to be in the Big 12. Do the football fans per se necessarily want to come to the Big 12? Is there a split, or is that just, I mean, fan is short for fanatic, Steve. We all know that. So is that just sort of the outlier, and more Utah fans are happy to be a part of the Big 12?
Man, this is a fun topic to discuss, because look, it's a real thing.
Sure.
I do think there's, let me ask you this, Brien.
Yeah.
When Oklahoma and Texas left the Big 12,
right,
were you as excited for BYU and Cincinnati to join the league as you were before, when you had Oklahoma and Texas?
No.
I don't know that.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and I'm not comparing the Big 12 to BYU.
Sure.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But just for Utah fans specifically, and going big picture here, right? So going from the Mountain West and being invited to the power level of football, of conference, of college athletics, right?
Mhm.
Being invited to the power level in the Pac-12, that was a big deal for Utah fans. And so to watch Utah over the last decade compete and make the strides that they have as an athletics program, in the Pac-12, there's a lot of, it's like dating your first girlfriend, right? Your first time going through, it's going to mean a lot, right? And I
Sure.
think that's what a lot of fans feel, is there's a lot of sentimental value, because this is where Utah broke through. They got the invite to the power level and in the Pac-12. And there's been some great battles over the last decade with USC, with Oregon, with Washington, programs that have had a lot of success. So, I do think it's a mixture of feelings, right? Like, there is disappointment that the Pac-12 is dead, because it's been such a great journey for Utah fans over the last decade in their climb, up the conference. But I'm starting to see it on the message board on Twitter. There's a lot of excitement for what's to come in the Big 12. It's going to be a competitive conference.
Right.
When you look at these teams on the field, the atmospheres that they play in, whether it be, on the gridiron, on the hardwood, these atmospheres are raucous. They are energetic. And, there's going to be, there's a lot of excitement for what that means for, Utah. And so, it's a difficult time right now. It's a sensitive time right now, because we are fresh off the death of a conference that gave Utah its opportunity. But I do think, as we get into things, they'll start to settle down on the interwebs.
I understand. If I could say this to Utah fans, just look at it this way. You got an opportunity in the Pac-12 that went away, but the Big 12 is giving you another opportunity to stay right where you're at. So I think that would be a good way to look at it, because I get what happened. I mean, it's just what you said. I mean, it just got ripped out underneath them. I mean, it was crazy how all of it happened. And it seemed like, Steve, it happened overnight. That's the thing that I think people have a hard time dealing with. It just, at the blink of an eye, it was gone. And they're like, hold on a second. Wait, what happened here? So, but I would just say to Utah fans, just look at it that way and just think, I know they got ripped away. I get it. But at the same time, you're getting another opportunity. And as you get into it, you will find, going to a place like Lawrence, Kansas, going to Ames, Iowa, you're going to find that those atmospheres, and not just basketball, I'm talking about football too, those atmospheres that you're going to run into are going to be similar, if not better, than what you're used to in the Pac-12.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of fans are starting to make that connection, make that, I don't want to say realization, but just, make that connection with the Big 12, that it's going to be a different atmosphere, a different vibe. And I think that's where you're starting to see some of a little more excitement start to creep in conversations with the Big 12, with the move to the Big 12 and that sort of thing. So Utah coming into this, expectations are high, and this is going to be a competitive league with a lot of good teams that have, stars coming up and up and coming, talent. So it's going to be, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. We'll come back on the other side, and we'll have a little bit more for you from Steve. Like I said, he covers Utah. They're coming into the conference. Great football program, Great basketball program. Just going to be a welcome addition to the Big 12. So we'll be right back after we hear a quick word from our sponsor with Synergy Financial Partners.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right, welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. Again, this is Brien Hanley with Steve Bartle, who covers Utah. Just talking about Utah coming into the conference again. Our first time on. We've embraced, like I said, all the newcomers, even if they're not in yet. We're claiming them. We're already claiming them. So we're glad that you guys are in. Glad that you're here. So let's talk a little bit. I know we dabbled into football a little bit. Have the expectations changed at all for Utah coming into the conference? I know it hasn't officially started or anything like that yet. And a lot of people are picking Utah to come right into the conference and win it. And they got a lot coming back. I suspect they're going to be an outstanding football team again. That has rubbed people in the Big 12 the wrong way. I'll go out there and readily admit it. They're thinking, well, wait a minute, this newcomer's coming in. I think the Big 12, some fans of the Big 12 have to realize how good Utah is. Maybe break that down a little bit, Steve, so people can understand that, you're not just this, high and mighty thinking you're better than everybody. No, Utah's really, really good.
Yeah, no, they've won 2 conference championships.
Yes.
2 out of the last 3 years, and have been competitive. They've been to 2 others in the 3 years before that. So, 4 out of the 5 years they've been in a conference championship game and won 2 of them, with the game in 2020, season in 2020 being ravaged by COVID. And so we don't really count that season. So, if we're talking just regular, typical seasons, they were in 4 straight conference championship games, right? Because again, we don't talk about 20. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm telling you, like, over the last, going back to 2018 and even before that, where 2016 is where I think Utah really started to gain traction, and make headway, at the top of a power conference in the Pac-12. But since 2018, they have been in a championship contending position and mindset. And so breaking through in 2021 with Cameron Rising and repeating in 2022, that's elevated expectations. And the wild thing is even on those 2 teams, 2021 and 2022, Utah still brings back a good chunk of the roster that were in those games. And so there's just this culture that has been cultivated of competing for championships. And now that they've done it, they bring back the 2 star players in 2021 and 2022, and Cameron Rising and Brant Keithy. They've added good pieces around them. They have a great defense that they're returning the majority of their production for them from this past season. So, there's just a lot of reasons that, Utah is being viewed the way that they are coming into the Big 12, because this is a team that has been competing for championships, over the last 5 years or so in a power conference. So, obviously it's going to be a bit of a process for everybody as, these teams and conferences are in transition, but Utah, it's legit. And again, they have the star pieces, they have the key pieces in place, they have depth, and they have the coaching, the guys that have been through it. And so they know how to get the job done. And like, look, I don't think, obviously you're going to have fans that think that they're just going to come in and run through things, but nobody, of meaning, coaches, players, nobody thinks that they're just going to come in and walk through this conference. They know that they've got to be hard at work, learning about these new opponents, learning about the atmospheres that they're going to be in. And they know that they have got to put in a ton of work to come in and compete for a championship in the Big 12.
Yes, absolutely. So, Steve, here's another thing that we've asked a couple of different people, and I'll ask you too, is the Big 12, when you lose a Texas and you lose a OU, you're losing 2 huge national brands. Utah coming into the conference, also Colorado, Arizona, and Arizona State. they're not going to necessarily have that big national brand as a conference per se. Do you believe, or I guess, does Utah fans believe that is a good thing, that to stand on and group together as a whole saying, hey, we're really competitive. We're not going to have the one team or maybe the two teams that win this thing every year. We're going to have a really competitive conference where 2 or 3 years, it might be these couple of teams. The next 2 or 3 years, it'll be these other, couple of teams that win it. And we're just talking about football, because in basketball, the brands are going to be there. I mean, the Kansas, the Arizonas, those brands are going to be there. But we're just talking about football. Do you think it's more important that they stick together as, you know what, we are the brand? Or do we think, because it'll take a long time for one school to build a brand by itself anyway, but do you think it's more important to do that versus just having 1 or 2 teams be the national brand?
What an interesting question, right? Like, I think, I do think that there is value in having a flagship bearer for the conference, right? Like, I think that's an important thing for these conferences, especially in where we're at with college football. Absolutely. And the ever-changing landscape, right? Like, being relative and being in the conversation, of the top programs in the country, I think is more important now than it's ever been. Yep. Just because so much is at stake, right? Like, we just watched a conference of over 100 years die because it didn't have a flagship program capable of competing with the other national flagship bearers in the country, the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the Georgias. It didn't have that. And so it's a conference that got put to rest. And, you're seeing now there's still value. There was still a ton of value in that conference, as we've seen. 4 teams go to the Big Ten, 4 teams go to the Big 12. 3 go to the 2 go to the ACC, which is going to be weird. Stanford and Cal in the ACC. That makes no sense. And then 2 other programs, get left behind in Washington State and Oregon State. But I think it just kind of reflects the value that was in that conference and the need for flagship bearers, right? You've got to be able to compete, at high levels in college football specifically, because there's just so much money at stake. So, I do think it's a good thing that there's a lot of competitive teams, that there is kind of that this year, it's this team that they've developed this program over the last couple of years, and now they're peaking at the right time. You've got this team now this year that's peaking at the right time. I do think that that's an important element to the Big 12, but I do think you need a program or two that can, consistently be among the top in college football, just because, again, of everything that we now have to be aware of. Correct. In college football. It's so important to have that.
Yeah. And it's a lot of people said the same thing as you did, Steve. It's important to have. The problem with that is, how long does it take to build that kind of national brand? I mean, it's not a thing that you can do 1 or 2 years. For instance, like, you look at Washington, people think, okay, well, Washington has some history. I go, but Washington's not always, they were in the national championship game this year, but before that, how good was Washington, continuously go back just 5 years. They weren't always just this powerhouse, and it takes a while to build that. I do think Utah's on that path. Being in the Big 12, or not, I'm sorry, the Pac-12, and being in 4 title games, and let's just call it 4 in the 4 years. That makes a difference. And it's kind of why I wanted to have you on, Steve, and explain that kind of stuff to Big 12 fans, because I just don't think they understood how good Utah really was. I think they came into it thinking, okay, like you mentioned, they were in the Mountain West not too long ago, and they're thinking, okay, and then maybe they caught lightning in a bottle. And I used to fight back with that to the Big 12 fans and tell them, no, Utah's been good for a while. This is a good program. And how I judge it, look, I'm an old offensive lineman. I always judge it by that. Look at the physicality that Utah plays with. That'll tell you everything about a program. And Utah plays a physical brand of football, which I think is going to be great coming into the Big 12, because the Big 12 does that too. A lot of the schools anyway do that too. They're going to fit right in with that.
Yeah, I think, I'm glad that you had me on to paint, to kind of illustrate the big picture here, right? Because, Utah is a program like a Cincinnati, like a UCF, like a BYU, like a Houston, that had to make that transition from the G5 to the P5. And it's a process. It took Utah, like I said, it took 2016 is when they really started to make headway, competing with the top of the conference in the Pac-12. That was 6 years worth of work, of blood, sweat, and tears on the recruiting trail, coaching these guys up. Like, it takes time and sustained success and commitment to it. Like, the fact that, Kyle Whittingham was able to keep most of his staff together for as long as he has, I think that's the big key. But again, to your point, I think sustained success is so vital to a program. When we're talking about becoming that flagship bearer, becoming a leader of a conference, you've seen it. Kansas State, Kansas, they've come up. Oklahoma State has been in the mix for years. Having that sustained success is so vital. And again, just Utah being in 4 championship games over the last however many years. That's why expectations are so high for Utah.
Absolutely. Before I get you out of here, I got to ask you this question, and I'm sure you've answered it a million times. And Utah fans, I apologize ahead of time, but I got to ask, because Big 12 fans, I don't think a lot of them know. Tell us the big difference between Utah and BYU, other than you don't like each other. And my late brother, his favorite rivalry, he used to scream, "Brien, are you watching the Holy War? Are you watching the Holy War?" He would say that all the time. That was his favorite rivalry. I don't think it was his favorite rivalry to watch, but it was his favorite one to say. So just kind of give everybody a little bit on what the big differences are between the two.
I mean, where do we begin? We're normal. They're weirdos.
Yes.
We'll chug a beer with you. We'll throw down in the tailgate. You can't drink beer down there in BYU on campus. You can't do that. It's if you picture, like I said, if you picture a normal person, that's a Utah fan.
Okay.
If you picture, weirdo, a little delusional, maybe sometimes, that's your BYU fan. Like, that's what we're talking about here. And they'll be nice to you. They'll talk you up. They'll buddy up with you. But once things go south for them, it's ugly. It turns ugly real quick. And forget about the friendship, forget about the buddy attitude. It's gone. The gloves are off. And they let it fly.
I love it. I love it.
But this is what's interesting though. It's like, one of my best friends is the BYU guy for 24/7 Sports, Jeff Hansen.
Yes,
he's grew up with him. Like, we're best friends. We go back and like we joke about it too. But it's so unique because it seeps into every aspect of life. As Kansas State fans, can attest, Iowa State, Iowa fans, like, it just seeps into every little crevice of life. Absolutely. This rivalry, and every conversation, every debate, it always comes up. Utah, BYU, it's one of the great rivalries in college sports.
Absolutely. I cannot wait. We've had Jeff on before, so I cannot wait to have you guys on later in the season. Preferably when you guys play in football season. I can't wait to have you guys on again, man. That was great. So I appreciate you taking the time, Jeff, to come and join us and kind of introduce the Big 12 to Utah athletics. So we really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on, Brien.
No problem. We're going to take one quick break before we end the show here. But again, we want to thank Steve for coming on. We'll have him back again. One last word from our sponsor here at Synergy Financial Partners.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right. Well, that was our introduction, people, to the Utah Utes, the University of Utah. Look, they're coming into the conference. It's going to be a good thing for the Big 12. I know that there's been a lot of scuttlebutt on, whether they wanted to be here. They want, if they thought they were better than this. Forget all of that, people. They're in. They're going to add some big time value to the Big 12 conference, not just in football, but in basketball as well. but look for them to be one of those powerhouses in football that we can gear up for every Saturday and say, Utah's playing us. Utah's playing there. We got to watch that game. They're going to be one of those brands and one of those teams that's going to elevate the Big 12 people. Just keep all of that in mind. They're going to be a great addition to this conference. I look forward to getting to know them a little bit better. Appreciate everybody that came and watched live today. Even if you're not live, remember to go to GoPowercat, go subscribe, go check us out later. We're here Tuesday through Friday, 1 p.m. Central Time. Come and check us out. We appreciate it. Remember to like, subscribe, more importantly, comment. We'll be back tomorrow to make sure we do it better.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.